Hello, I'm Jo Fay, and this is a SwissInfo podcast. SwissInfo is the multilingual and international public media company of Switzerland. Climate change manifests in a number of dramatic ways, with severe weather events becoming more and more frequent, heavy rainfall, extreme flooding, and on the other hand, droughts and wildfires are all part of the same problem. And it's cities that tend to get hotter than the countryside when a heatwave hits. What can be done about these urban heat traps? Welcome to the Swiss Connection Science Podcast. Winter is just beginning in Switzerland, but the memories of extreme weather from the past 6 months are still fresh in our minds. Heatwaves hit many cities, over 40 degrees Celsius in Barcelona, 42 degrees in Bucharest, and peaks of 43 degrees in the south of Italy. The heatwave that descended on parts of Europe this year, between the end of July and early August, drove temperatures beyond averages experienced in the past. Heat gets particularly intense in cities, since tarmac and concrete just soak up the sun. Extreme heat can cause heat exhaustion and make existing medical conditions even worse. So how can we really start to deal with this increasing heat? Our science journalist and climate specialist Luigi Iorio spoke to Jan Carmelier. He's a professor of building physics at the Federal Institute of Technology, ETH Zurich, and an expert on urban climate and heat waves.
You work in Zurich, which is the largest city in Switzerland. How do you deal with urban heat, you personally?
My office is totally to the south with a lot of glazing. There is some shading devices, but it's much too hot during a heat wave. There's no cross ventilation, there's no active cooling. So that means that when there's a heat wave, I stay home.
Okay.
It was mid-August when I spoke to Jan Carmelier via video call from our cooled office. I myself was happy to escape the unbearable heat from my rooftop city apartment. I asked Jan what he would suggest to me if I was the mayor of Bern and wanted to protect my fellow citizens from increasing heat waves in the future.
Two pillars. One is mitigation measures. We should mitigate as much as possible, which can be trees, can be less dark asphalt, maybe some green roofs, some white roofs. So these mitigation measures, we should, with everything what we change or what is newly built, we should have checked. Is this the best solution that we have for this moment? And then the second thing is this adaptation plans. So we should really make a complete plan of what happens during a heat wave. Which can go quite far. It can be also that you store enough water before that you can use them during the heat wave for spraying, whatever. Mm-hmm. So it can be plans that go together with flooding. You have this sponge city.
Yeah, sponge city. Yep.
Mm-hmm. So concept, which is as well for heat wave as for flooding.
The term sponge city means a urban area designed to retain excess water and reuse it when needed. For example, in times of drought. This can be achieved through bringing in lots of natural areas with trees, lakes, and parks, for example, to absorb rain and prevent flooding.
And then, of course, we should educate people how to behave during heat waves. And of course, probably we should need cooling centers, public transport that is cooled during those days, and all that. And then I think we still need more tools to predict the urban microclimate, better tools, faster tools, easier to use tools, so that the information, the knowledge that we have, some experts have, that this really, so that there's a real workflow of this information, that it really comes until the people, the designers and architects. More and more, we get projects that are climate change sensitive designs and so on. So this is going the good thing. But so yeah, I think there's a lot of work to be done to organize all that. And yeah, it's 5 before 12, as they say. Yeah?
Some scenarios predict that the average temperatures in Switzerland could increase by more than 4 degrees by the end of the century compared to pre-industrial levels. Jan and his team have made heat studies in cities and urban areas around the world to come up with ways to tackle this.
What we believe is that there's not one magic mitigation solution. It's a combination of many, and you have to find the best set or combination for a given neighborhood, which can be green roofs, it can be reflective roofs, green walls, it can be evaporative pavements, constructed shade, urban forestry, but it can be also that you need really to install some cooling. And of course, there you can have active cooling, which of course takes a lot of energy, but you can also have passive cooling effects, solutions, right? What we developed over the last 10 years is an urban microclimate model that can deal with all the physics that is involved in urban heat islands. And so it goes from wind flow, solar radiation, long wave radiation between surfaces, but also vegetation, trees, grass, green roofs. Most of the time we are in very strong heat stress and to moderate heat stress. So we see a lot of hotspots in cities.
For urban planners, it's important to learn about airstreams and ventilation corridors. With a constant shortage of apartments, there's a great pressure from urban regions to pack more housing in. This, however, can increase temperatures, since more buildings can block the flow of the air. In Zurich, Jan Carmelier and his team looked at the neighborhood of Altstetten. There are plans to densify the area, and the city authorities wanted to know whether the main road, the Altstettenstrasse, would still work as a good ventilation corridor. Jan shows me some simulations with different scenarios.
You see that you have a lot of places around this Altstettenstrasse and the Rautistrasse. You have a lot of places where it's very strong heat stress. And we looked at the impact of the trees, and we did the same simulations where we removed all the trees. Indeed, where you have the trees, you have a cooling of -3. But you see also red zone. So it means if you plant somewhere trees, at the other part, it can become worse, where you don't have trees. And the reason is that you have less wind. You block the wind, and by that so that's something that the city should be very aware of.
Another important factor is night cooling. The question here is whether dense urban areas can be built in a way to allow them to cool off at night. Jan shows me a wind flow pattern simulation on the screen.
The wind is coming from the bottom of the screen, but you see that the wind flow pattern is very complex and changes and is completely dominated by the presence of the buildings. And you see also, this is during the night, you see you have a temperature in some zones above 26.5. Now, 26.5 is taken as the comfort temperature above which you get problems to sleep.
Okay.
At night is very important during a heat wave because this is the time you recuperate from the heat. And if then it's too hot, people really start to suffer, and that's when you get problems, health problems.
The ground is another thing to look at. Too many surfaces are sealed.
So I think Switzerland has a tradition to use too much asphalt everywhere. So that we should not do. Where you don't have to use asphalt, you don't use asphalt, you use porous pavements. So these are pavements with special pore structures, so they can receive a lot of water. Of course, you cannot use those materials where you have heavy traffic, okay? Where people walk, where you don't have heavy cars, there you can use porous pavements. And then, of course, you could use different colors. But I think you asked somewhere the question, why we don't do like in Los Angeles, where they made everything white.
Yeah.
So the answer is easy, it's the glare. So if you have a white surface and you have a lot of sun and you're driving your car, you get too much sun in your eyes and it's dangerous. I see this more as a solution, for instance, for supermarkets, where you make a white roof, you limit the cooling that you need inside a lot. And you also make the neighborhood much cooler, and it's a big surface. And then if the parking place in front is full of trees, what I don't like, but okay, if you would do that, you would cool down this neighborhood with several degrees Celsius.
Okay. You say that you cannot work in the office when it's too hot, also because of the big windows. I mean, what would you suggest to the architect?
Yeah, we should design our buildings that in summer you could have cross ventilation. I believe that in not maybe the extreme heat waves, but the most of the heat waves, I believe that night ventilation will be still very good and very useful. So that means that you should have buildings where you can open your windows and where you can allow wind to go through, and you should store the cold during the night. You should have outside shading devices. So ventilation, shading devices, and sufficient heat capacity inside. I think these are the three main things we can think of. And of course, your roof should be insulated, although a lot of people don't believe it. But if you have a non-insulated roof, you really get a lot of heat inside your building through the roof. So you should insulate. If we go for heat pumps in winter, we can also use them in summer for cooling.
Can we say that the most effective measure to reduce the temperature in cities are trees? Planting trees is still one of the best solutions.
Yeah, I think for sure we can plant more trees. There are a lot of places where there are not enough trees. So I think this is for sure something that every city should do. Look at the places where are not enough trees to make a plan of planting those trees. That is the first thing I would do. I would also, densification is okay if you add enough vegetation, which could be trees, grass fields, urban forestry. So we should densify, but we should not densify everything. So what they did in a lot of cities was densify, and everything became mineral. So the downtown cities in US and in other countries, they are totally mineral.
Mineral urban areas here means the opposite of a sponge city that we mentioned earlier. So urban areas that are sealed off with concrete and asphalt with little capacity to absorb water.
Sorry, by densify you mean build more, right?
Build more, yeah. So we still have the stress that we need more. So there is still a stress on build more and build higher. That's the tendency in Zurich, that they want to build higher. But of course, this comes with some additional problems. Now, the mistake they did in the past is that these neighborhoods have less than 5% vegetation, where we always say you need at least 20% of the area should be vegetated. That's what we see in studies we made. If you go below 20, it becomes worse.
You mentioned Toronto and Montreal before, with very hot summer, but also with very cold winter. Could measure against heat island prove counterproductive during winter? Yeah,
so if you plant trees, what in our regions, we should always use deciduous trees, so trees that leave their leaves. So that means that the solar radiation you get during the winter goes through the trees, and in summer it's blocked, it's shadowed. So to have solar radiation during winter is good because it can, when it comes through your windows, it can reduce your heating costs. We should really see that it's very urgent to put really priority on it. We work with the cities in Vienna, in Montreal, Singapore, Sydney. They all are aware and are planning mitigation measures, but nobody has the solution, right? So this is the work that still has to be done to find the set of solutions for specific location in the city. Okay.
Wonderful.
Good.
Thank you very much.
Yeah,
Hope to talk to you again in the future. Thank you.
That was our science journalist Luigi Iurio talking to Jan Carmelier. Luigi, you're Swissinfo's climate change specialist. What stories are you working on at the moment?
Well, several countries like Spain, Italy, and Germany were hit by floods in recent weeks and in the summer, which caused widespread damage and lots of victims. So my next story will be on how effective protective measures are in preventing this kind of natural catastrophe, which will become more intense and frequent because of climate change.
That sounds like a really interesting story for right now. It's such an important topic at the moment. And do you know which countries you're going to be focusing on in particular?
Well, I want to know what is Switzerland doing, how much is investing in this kind of protective measure, also compared to other European countries.
Okay, interesting stuff. Thanks a lot for joining us, Luigi. Next week on the Swiss Connection Science podcast, we'll be talking about melting glaciers. In the wake of climate change, glaciers have released all sorts of objects as the ice melts. I remember an aircraft from the Second World War that was found in the Swiss Alps, then parts of prehistoric animals and even human bodies. Now scientists are looking at ancient microorganisms that have been living in the glacier ice for thousands of years. Most of them are still unknown, but they could help us solve some of the biggest problems of our times, such as antibiotic resistance or plastic pollution. That's all coming up next time on The Swiss Connection. For more science stories, visit our website swissinfo.ch. You can help others to find our podcast by leaving us a 5-star review on your chosen podcast platform. Today's episode was recorded and edited by our science and video journalist, Michaela Andina. For more content, visit our website, swissinfo.ch. I'm Jo Fay. Thanks for listening.
Hello, I'm Imogen Folks from Swiss Info's Inside Geneva podcast. On February 24th, 2022, Russia attacked Ukraine. The invasion caused Europe's largest refugee crisis since World War II, and during the year-long conflict, tens of thousands, possibly hundreds of thousands of people, soldiers and civilians, have been killed. Over the past year, a number of episodes of Inside Geneva have looked at the heavy humanitarian toll of the war and its wider implications for the world. We've been joined by historians and international human rights experts to ask about the background to the invasion. We've talked to major UN aid agencies about how the war in Ukraine is impacting other humanitarian crises. And we've asked if sanctions or war crimes investigations can stop or at least limit this conflict. If you're particularly concerned by the war in Ukraine, do listen to these episodes. You can find Inside Geneva free to listen on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, and all your usual podcast apps.